Chelsea have really made tremendous results and performances this season. But one thing that has fascinated me is the back-to-back clean sheets that Chelsea have kept. And these clean sheets have not been kept at home, but rather away. So Enzo Maresca, a manager whose team really struggled in preseason and a team that really struggled a lot last season because of defensive problems, are actually looking defensively solid. So, is there something that Enzo Maresca has done to improve the overall defensive organization of Chelsea? Maresca talked about Arsenal in his press conference. He's indicating that he really looked at how Arsenal have learned to defend. Now, Chelsea's defensive system cannot necessarily be complemented on the structure that Maresca has imposed, but also the personnel, with key defenders such as Colwill, Marc Cucurella, and Tosin Adarabioyo looking quite solid and refined. In our video today, we are going to try and tactically analyze the clean sheet that Chelsea kept away at West Ham, despite the waves and waves of attack that West Ham launched against Chelsea in this game. Before we even begin our analysis, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Now, looking at how West Ham was set up, West Ham was set up in a 4-2-3-1 that moved into a 3-4-3, with width being generated by the wing backs. In this structure, West Ham wanted to create numerical overloads down the wide areas and try to bypass Chelsea by going through the wide areas. Now, Chelsea understood the assignment in this game, sitting in a 4-4-2. A 4-4-2 structure is the best structure to nullify a 3-4-3. So in this structure, when Chelsea sat in a 4-4-2, West Ham had a problem because now they could not go through the center of the pitch because Chelsea had 6 players there, and in the wide areas Chelsea doubled up on them with their wingers and their fullbacks. And this created lots and lots of issues for West Ham. Now, after Chelsea scoring the first goal earlier on, they decided to sit in a mid 4-4-2 block, not needing to press West Ham aggressively high to win the ball, but rather looking to try and set pressing traps for West Ham. Now, Chelsea were unique in the way they pressed, in that their 2 double pivots will also push up in momentarily with regards to how the movement of Palmer and Nicholas Jackson was throughout the game. When Chelsea decided to sit in a mid-block, they decided to use their forwards as extra pivots, looking just to sit on Paqueta and Rodriguez and deny them space on the ball. And in this fashion, they would allow the centre-back space on the ball, but ensure the center of the pitch was maximally covered, allowing Fernandes and Caicedo to be free in that midfield region. Now, this was an issue for West Ham and a blessing for Chelsea. So how? Now, Chelsea sitting in this narrow 4-4-2 block ensured that they would allow West Ham to have the ball in areas where they couldn't hurt Chelsea. Now, in this kind of fashion, Chelsea are actually controlling the game because they're actually dictating how West Ham are going to play. And in this fashion, Chelsea are showing that not only will they play the possession-based football, but rather play a system that will allow them to actually bait West Ham to carry the ball forward in a zone where West Ham will be undernumbered. Now, in this fashion, we saw Palmer being the pressing trigger, in that Maresca did not want West Ham to build down the left, but rather wanted them to build down the right. And this can be understood because of the position of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's not regarded as an offensive threat when he tries to overlap forward, and therefore Palmer will look to cut the passing lane to the left-sided centre-back and force Alvarez to play down the right. Now, in this fashion, the game will be forced to be played down the right, so that Maresca could try to make sure that he narrows the pitch as much as possible, limiting West Ham's progression through the middle and force them to try and use the wide areas that they actually wanted to create overloads. And why was this so? Now, when Palmer would spring forward, Alvarez could not look to play the ball, first time ball to the pivot, because one thing, Moises Caicedo and Fernandes work was to move momentarily and look to cover one pivot at a time. Now Alvarez had just one option, to recycle the ball out wide, and this is what Chelsea wanted. Because once the ball will be recycled out wide in this kind of fashion, then the wide centre-back will be allowed to receive the ball. And again, we will see a momentary movement by Chelsea, with Nicholas Jackson being the player to spring out. Now Jackson would move in an out-to-in fashion, looking to spring from that press, pressing while using his cover shadow to deny the opposition centre-back from playing the ball back to Alvarez, as Palma will be looking to drop deep to cover that pass back to the pivot. Now this only allowed the centre-back to have the option to play the ball to the wing-back. And this is where Chelsea wanted the ball to be played, because they knew having the touchline as an extra defender in this case will even make them more strong, that West Ham could not actually play through them. Now in this fashion, Chelsea now would engage in an aggressive touchline press, with one player going after the ball while the other players looking to cover all the nearby passing options. Now Cucurella will hang on to Kudus, Fernandes will cover the midfield option, while Jackson will prevent the ball from being played back to the centre back. And once the ball will be played to Aaron Wan-Bissaka, then Sancho will be the one to engage into the press. Fernandes will look to try and cover the pass to the midfield, while Palma will also move back into the midfield to look and try and cover that pass back from reaching to Lucas Paqueta. And Chelsea will make Wan-Bissaka play the ball in field, which Fernandes actually won. And once Chelsea won this ball, now they had a lot of space. They will not just play the ball backwards, but if the ball is played to Caicedo and then he plays it back to Madueke, then Chelsea have a 4v3 overload against West Ham. Now sometimes West Ham decided to play down the right, and down the right again, the philosophy was the same. In that down the left they had a lot of advantages, because we started to see Somerville looking to drop even wider, and this really pulled up Fofana in this position. But the situation was still the same, in that the difference with the left hand side is that Noni Madueke was the one who was actually shifting across, meaning that Palma in this case will be the one just to sit on the pivot, while Jackson will be the one to force the ball out wide. Now Chelsea in this case, because of the position of Somerville, and they did not want Jared Boyne to drop deep to receive the ball in space, we will see Noni Madueke being the one who dropped deep into that inside mid, into that semi-wing back position to try and prevent this ball. And Chelsea knew Palma and Jackson, to be precise, understood how to create that 2v1 overload. Now this is why Maresca was so impressed, because Chelsea would actually move into something like a 5-3-2, with Madueke being the one to cover the Emerson, and Chelsea would employ a man-to-mark / zonal approach kind of defensive structure. And this structure made it so difficult for West Ham to actually utilize the central spaces and deny creative players such as Lucas Paqueta the space in midfield. Now when you look at the clips that I've shared to you, you can see some clear patterns: zonal approach kind of defending and man-marking approach. Now I've done a video on the zonal man-marking approach kind of system and how this system would have improved Chelsea's overall defensive structure. Now I've included a short clip on this video that we actually did, for those who might have missed it, on how Enzo Maresca could actually improve Chelsea's overall defensive structure with regards to their zonal man-marking system. And look at is the man marking and zonal marking system. We are going to try and understand what is man marking system and zonal marking system, and in these two phenomenons of defensive organization, we're also going to try and see the defense line and how the defense line moves relative to the both two of those defensive organizations. So let's begin. In the first structure that we need to understand is that the team usually has different structures in all the three phases of the pitch: the defensive third, the middle third, and the final third. Now we start with zonal marking. So zonal marking, the players are actually distributed in zones. For example, the yellow boxes can show the zones in which each player needs to occupy. So the players is tasked to be pressing and actually closing down the ball when the ball enters their zone. And this is something that each player really knows, and it's something that is really coached amongst top managers. So each player is responsible to whether relative to where the ball is actually played. So in this case, the ball has been played to the center back. So if the center back advances, it is the work of one striker to actually look to press him. So when the ball leaves his zone, he stops pressing the center back and allows another player to pick up the ball in the other zone. Now, this is something that we've seen elite teams and Maurizio Sarri actually look to try to do. Now, in the WM system that was actually used in the 1940s and 1950s, we realized that because this is the structure that most teams looked to play with, we saw a lot of teams use man-to-man press, meaning that man marking was the main form of defensive organization, with the opponent looking to just pick each and every player. So each player was actually, the team was actually matched all over the pitch because everybody had their marker. Now, this structure of man-marking system has its own demerits, but it is a structure that is very aggressive because now players know who they are supposed to cover. Now, in this system, you highly relied upon the qualitative strength of each player, the qualitative strength of a defender and the qualitative strength of a striker or a midfielder to be able to beat their marker. Now, because of this structure, we saw that a lot of teams started to come up with ways of dragging their markers over, and the striker was very crucial because in the 1950s, I think there's a team that played against England that the striker actually introduced the false nine concept, where the striker would drop deep, and if the center back or the sweeper center back will actually drop deep to cover him, then space will be there in behind. And this relied heavily on the strength, the physicality of the striker to actually know how to outmuscle the defender, link up with another player, and look to actually play players in that space vacated. And this is one of the demerits of the man marking system, because you need players who are able to win their duels, and if they fail to win their duels, then automatically the entire man marking system is destroyed. If the striker fails to actually drop deep to cover the player, then what you'll realize is that the player will receive the ball in space where the man marking player is not able to reach, and once he's received this ball in space, he's now able to turn and look to create something against this player. Now, this man marking strategy had to be changed because a lot of teams actually realized that there are some teams which came up with ways to play through it. And because of this intense way of actually looking to play through this man marking system, the zonal marking system was actually preferred. We are going aggressive block. And in the higher block, you can employ two types of defensive strategies. Now, there are some managers, for example, in Bologna, where you find a manager is actually using the man marking system, meaning that he's giving each player the task to man mark their opponent. We even saw Jurgen Klopp use this in Liverpool, even in the game against Chelsea, where everybody decided to go man to man. And in this position, the only player you might find who's free is the goalkeeper. And therefore, because the team is pushing high up and is actually putting a lot of pressure, then you might find the team will just decide to go long. And therefore, in this kind of situation, what you're going to realize is that now the opponents should be quite serious in pressing, because if one player manages to lose his marker, then the entire system falls, because now they will have an extra player in build-up who will be free, and that will actually destroy the entire pressing structure. Now, if you decide to go man-marking system, also another thing you need to know is that you need to apply so much pressure high up, because if balls are played over the top, you need to trust the pace and the strength of your center backs to be able to win these balls. Otherwise, if you're not able to win these balls, then you are more susceptible to actually be destroyed and shredded with players who are making runs in behind. And because of this deadly threat, you find teams using the zonal marking system, something that even Maurizio Sarri had really emphasized in using. Now, the zonal marking system informs that the team needs to move in a structured form, in a ball-oriented form, rather than a man-marking form. You don't mark a player who doesn't have a ball, but rather you mark players around the ball and actually look to cover spaces. Now, the defense line moves relative. If the player in possession actually And in this relative playing system, you force the ball wide and then you use the touchline as an extra defender. Now, when the team is in a more conserved, reserved mid-block structure, we look at the first thing about the horizontal lines. We look at the horizontal defense line. So how does the team defense line move horizontally? We're actually looking at the zonal marking system. Now, the zonal marking system is very, very important. So if the team is looking to press aggressively in the mid-block, meaning that they're denying the opponent space on the ball in the mid-block, then what you'll realize is that if you're playing with a man marking system, then the same philosophy remains. That is, all players cover their markers. And therefore, if you cover your markers, you will force the opponent to go back. And if they try to use their goalkeeper to step forward, something that Manchester City have done, then you are able to put your players in the opponent is able to put their players in positions whereby they are able to hurt you. Remember, if they're able to get that extra player. And that is the merit of using man marking. And even in instances where they are able to build, one player is able to beat their man, then he drives in field, then he will be able to actually create numerical overloads against the opponent. But what about zonal marking? Zonal marking is not so interested about marking the player, but rather ensuring that you deny space to the opponent. And in this case, when the opponent has the ball, zonal marking is a ball-oriented structure. They look at the position in which the ball is likely going to move. So if the player is looking to play the ball towards the left hand side of the pitch, then the entire team looks to shift towards that side. The two players who are pressing high up, their main aim is to ensure they deny central progression. And when the ball is played towards one side, one player is the one who's supposed to shift, while the entire midfield and defensive line also shift horizontally. Now, this shift horizontally is quite different, because sometimes you might find that the fullback is the one who starts to cover the wing. So the fullback will be the one who shifts towards that side. But when the fullback shifts towards that side, the entire backline starts to also make that shift towards that right hand side. And this is how the team actually looks to make a shift. Now, the angle in which the defense line moves is actually very important. Majority of teams prefer using a flat defense line structure, meaning that the fullback is in this position. When he gets bypassed, the center back is able to move backwards and cover him. Now, that is one defensive structure system. There is the flat 3 center backs and 1 fullback structure, where the fullback in this position is the one who confronts the winger. And the line remains straight so that they are able to play the offside trap against the other opposition player who is trying to actually make runs on the other side. And because of this defensive line structure, you find a team is able to actually draw the lines quite well. There's also what we call the diagonal, meaning that this is the main diagonal, meaning that it is moving like a staircase. So the center back is moving higher, the other center back is moving higher. So in this position, the players are covering for each other. The fullback is being covered to by the center back is being covered to by the other center back, and the other center back is being covered to by the left back in that case, meaning that this is a defense line. But the problem with this structure is that it actually destroys the offside trap, because now if the opponent can get space where he can play the ball in field and have a player who's able to switch the ball towards the other side, he's actually able to get the entire team is actually going to have greater ground, because the entire team is not actually giving him that offside trap. Then there is the other form of the diagonal, that is the inverted diagonal. Now, the inverted diagonal is that the fullback is the one who actually commits, and there are no covers. The other defenders do not cover. And in this case, the opponent, their main aim of the defense line is to ensure that the opponent is caught offside. Now, here you heavily rely upon the passing accuracy, the